Hi and welcome to my channel. I thought I would create a video on what I consider the best order to read Jane Austen's novels in. This is a question I get asked quite a lot, either from people who have just started their Jane Austen journey or those who have read maybe one of her novels either at school or at university and they want to know which one to pick up next. And if I'm being honest, my answer always changes. I think depending on how I particularly feel that day. And so I thought it'd be really good to just sit down and really think about it. What is a good order to read the novels in and why? And then obviously I thought I would share it with all you lovely people. If you want to stick around to see more videos on Jane Austen content, bookish content, or just cozy living, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. This is an exciting journey I'm venturing on and I would love to have you a part of it. Okay, I might have to look down occasionally just because I might end up on a tangent if I don't, because I did really think about my answers here and I don't want to just be like spiraling out of control. So my first pick is maybe not so surprising, and that is Pride and Prejudice. So I truly think that the storyline in Pride and Prejudice is the most engaging. Compared to some of Austen's other works, there's a lot of movement in this novel. So we're traveling around a lot of England and it's to like really scenic places. And so it keeps you engaged throughout. And on top of that, the protagonist, Elizabeth Bennet, is probably the most appealing to modern audiences because she's bold, she's witty, she's confident, she's independent, and she stands up to men and women in power. And so I feel like as a modern audience, she's a really accessible protagonist. Compared to some of the other works, in this book, she only really gives airtime to characters who are going to add to the plot. And so it often feels a little bit more fast-paced than some of the others because you're not getting bogged down in secondary characters or minor characters. You can really hone in on the storylines that you're meant to and really invest in, the heroine's journey. I think also, in terms of storyline, it's the most well-known because of the popularity of the 2005 film and the 1995 adaptation. It's just one that a lot of people already know. And I feel like sometimes when you're approaching classic literature, it's good to have kind of a foundational knowledge of like what's going to happen, just because I think sometimes it can take a little while to get into the writing style of older texts. And so yeah, I think it sometimes helps to already have kind of a little bit of knowledge of the characters and the plot before you get started. Obviously, in terms of the romantic storyline, this book is top notch. That's why it's picked up by so many directors and people who are making kind of modern takes on the same story. And, I'd hate to see you go through life without having, a Mr. Darcy experience. And, even if you should hate it, this is one of the books that always ends up in those, books you should read before you die lists. And so at least you tick one of those books off. But you're not going to hate it, I promise. So yeah, that is why Pride and Prejudice is my first pick. So the second Jane Austen book I think you should read is probably a little bit more surprising, and that is Northanger Abbey. So out of all of Jane Austen's completed 6 novels, this is the shortest one, and I think Austen probably had a lot of fun writing this one because the novel as a whole is a satire of Gothic literature, and as a genre this is something that was really rising in popularity in the Georgian era, particularly among women. And so I think Austen's kind of taking a stab at how all these women were flocking to bookshops to buy these Gothic texts, probably including her because she does mention a lot of Gothic texts that are out at the time in this book. And so yeah, she's kind of making a commentary on Gothic literature in general, but also as readers how we can get like fully immersed into fictional worlds. And Catherine Morland as a protagonist is someone who I think everyone can relate to at some point in their life. I definitely can kind of see my younger self in Catherine. She's pretty naive, she wants to talk about books to everybody all the time, and basically the story is her coming to realise that the real world isn't like the fiction that she's reading. But that doesn't mean that it's not problematic at times. Austen makes a great point of saying, it's not necessarily ghosts that you should be afraid of, but real people who can be deceitful and cruel at times, and you can't trust everybody. People often have selfish motives that you don't realise when you first meet them. The romance side of this one is a lot more easygoing, so it's very fun and flirtatious. There's very little angst, which is nice. The book showcases 2 things that Jane Austen really masters, and that is complex female relationships and dynamic villains. So Jane Austen is such a master of the villain, and I think with this book in particular compared to some of the others, she's a little bit more obvious about, you know, kind of like the hero positions and villain positions, whereas in some of the books that I'll talk about a little bit later, it becomes a lot more subtle. And so I think this is a great one to pick up first, because I think she's really obvious about the traits that she considers, you know, good qualities in people and bad qualities in people. I think it really sets the tone as well of what makes a good female friendship and what doesn't, because again, that's another theme that you'll see throughout her works. So the third book on my list is actually Sense and Sensibility. So this is one that I've actually seen a lot of people put as their recommended first read or second read. I think maybe because, like Pride and Prejudice, the adaptations of this book have been really popular, particularly the one done by Emma Thompson that had Alan Rickman in. And I think out of all of them, I think this story is the most authentic. You know, Austen really states that love isn't always straightforward, and the sweep you off your feet kind of hero isn't necessarily the person that you are going to end up with or should end up with. And so I think it's more true to life, this storyline, that, you know, it's not always you meet one person and that's it, you're sorted for life. However, the reason that I've put it as my third pick is because I think out of all of Austen's works, this is the hardest one to read. I think you can really tell that it's one that she wrote earlier on, and compared to some of the other books, we actually have two parallel storylines because this is the only book with two protagonists. Another reason why I wouldn't put this one as my first or second is because there are a crazy number of secondary characters in this book, secondary and minor characters, and it can sometimes get a bit confusing to keep tabs on everybody. Even like for myself, I've read this book so many times and there's still moments that I'm like, who is this person? Like there's one particular character who goes by so many different names. I think her name's like Anne, and yet sometimes she's referred to as Nancy. And I'm just like, what? And then I read that that's a nickname for Anne, but I'm like, Nancy's longer than Anne, so how is it a nickname? But so my point being, I think it's good to grasp Austen's writing style before you tackle this one, because it is a really wonderful read. For a lot of my friends, this is actually their favourite book, but I think it's good to come to as your third pick. Okay, so once you've finished Sense and Sensibility, I think this is a great time to pick up Emma. So Emma is my fourth pick. This is such a fun novel. When I think about Emma, I always think about like summer and strawberries and hometown vibes. This book, compared to some of the other ones that we've gone through already, has a real sense of community to it. So characters and setting alike are confined to a small town, which is slightly different than most of Austen's other novels, where we're traveling a little bit. So we're either traveling, you know, to different cities like Bath or London, or we're traveling to different locations like in Pride and Prejudice we go to Derbyshire. But with Emma, that's really not the case. You are confined to this small town of Highbury, and so you become engrossed with small town living and everything that goes along with that. So, you know, everybody knows what's going on with everybody, or so they think. So this is a real book of friendship, community, secrets, mystery. There's a lot going on. I actually did an episode with a friend where we were kind of referring to it as, it's kind of like a Cluedo board, because even though there's like no murders or anything, like everything's going on in this small space, and there's a lot of secrecy. I think Austen makes the point of saying you don't have to travel that far from your doorstep to get a good story, because sometimes, you know, what's going on in your own community can be just as crazy and exciting and surprising as if you went further afield. So however, the reason that I put this as my fourth pick, even though I know it's become really popular due to the 2020 film, is because Emma as a protagonist is really Marmite. And so there's a lot of people like myself who love Emma and really enjoy her as a heroine. However, there's a lot of people who really hate Emma. And I have seen people in the past pick up Emma as kind of their second read after they read Pride and Prejudice, hate Emma, and it put them off like reading other Jane Austen books. You know, Austen herself said, I'm going to take a heroine whom no one but myself will much like. So I think she knew that she may rub people the wrong way with Emma. And I guess what's different about Emma to some of the other heroines as well is she's already wealthy. So the element of money and needing to marry for financial security is taken out of the picture. She can be a bit snobby at times and a little entitled. And so there's a different dynamic in this book. And also on top of that, you're actually seeing everything through Emma's eyes. So if you don't like Emma as a heroine, it's a bit difficult to read the book, because the book is from Emma's perspective. This is her world, which is as narrow as the setting itself, because she doesn't venture far from her doorstep. So Yeah, it's a very different type of book. It is really fun. The hero protagonist relationship is amazing in this book. It's kind of more similar to the Darcy Elizabeth one, where they're able to debate with one another. So in that sense, it's a really fun book and really enjoyable. And also, if you love the friends to lovers trope, then you will really love Emma. Okay, so we're on to the fifth pick, and at this point, you know, you've read all these Austen books, you're on a high, you're loving everything Jane Austen. I think this is a good time to pick up Mansfield Park. So I think Mansfield Park is the novel that most people have a complicated relationship with. If you loved Pride and Prejudice and Emma for the bold, independent, strong heroine, you may struggle a little with Fanny Price. She's a very different protagonist than the one that Austen usually writes. And all the things that Austen's told us in the past that are important, you know, being lively, being bold, being witty, being a little outspoken. In Mansfield Park, she says, you know, all of those things are great, but there's a line. There's a line you can cross, and if you cross it, there's no coming back. And so this book, in comparison to the others, is really a study of morals. And I think why a lot of people struggle with it is because I feel like in a modern world, your morals are very much individual. It's like, what do you as a person believes right and wrong, or is good or bad? And I feel like it's an individual thing. Whereas in the time that Jane Austen was writing, morals and like Christian values are really intertwined. And so I think it's kind of more difficult nowadays to kind of see it from the same stance, you know, what's good and what's bad, and what's right and what's wrong, and who should be condemned for what. And so because of that reasons, I think this novel's a little bit more tricky to read and a little bit more tricky to enjoy. However, if you love analysing books and studying books and taking a deeper dive, this one is amazing. Out of all of the books, this is the one that I love to write about and analyse the most, because it's such a fascinating read, and because it's got kind of more negative tones than some of the others. There's a lot to unpack in this one, but I do think it's worth coming to a little bit later, because if I had read this one first, I wouldn't be here today, I don't think. Like, I think it would have put me off Jane Austen for life. But yeah, it's definitely one that's worth reading, but I think it's worth reading a little bit later. Okay, we've made it to the end of the list. So the final Jane Austen book I think you should pick up is Persuasion. So I think people benefit coming to Persuasion last, because I genuinely think this is Austen's best written work, and I think it's a true testament to her writing journey. So I think after reading everything else, when you come to this, you can truly appreciate how she's grown as a writer. And this book in particular has a real air of maturity to it. You know, unlike some of the others, this book's about second chances and holding on to hope when all hope's gone, and longing and, you know, deep burning love. It makes me think of colours like maroon and red and all of those kind of things. And so there's a lot of passion in it, but there's also a lot of turmoil. And in this one in particular, the narrator and reader are on really intimate terms, which you don't see in a lot of her books. I think the closest you get is Emma, but Emma's very lively and fun, and even though she does go through turmoil, it's all of her own doing. Whereas with Anne, you're really experiencing a lot of emotions. And so, yeah, I think this is a beautiful one to come to at the end. It's a fantastic love story, really endearing, and also it is going to completely change your standard of letter writing. Yeah, they're going to go way up, guys, way up after you read this. And if you've not yet watched any adaptations of this book, I really recommend holding off and reading it first, because I genuinely don't think there's any adaptation that's truly been able to capture how beautiful this novel is. I think in the end, Jane Austen is truly going to convince you that it's better to be alone than not be with the person that you love. And it's worth holding out forever for the person that you truly love. So I think it's a great way to wrap up your Jane Austen reading journey. Obviously, Jane Austen has some other works as well. She has a juvenilia, she has shorter novels, her unfinished works like Sanditon. However, I just wanted to talk about the completed 6 novels today. I'm sure I'll do some other things on some of the other works if that's what you want to see. Just let me know. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're just starting out on your Jane Austen journey, I'm so excited for you. And if you're super familiar with her works and you just wanted to hear my thoughts on everything, thank you for staying to the end. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, like what order do you think people should read it in? Please hit the thumbs up button if you did enjoy it, especially because I'm new to the platform. That will really help me out. And yeah, I will see you in another video. Good luck. Please ignore, I've got the hiccups now. The hiccups.